Normally we do it at 3 o'clock, but that's okay because Amy's got like stuff to do because she's an important person. Amy Edmonds is on for Wyoming Liberty Group. I mean, you're booked solid everywhere, aren't you?
I don't know about book solid, but thank you so much for accommodating me.
Just trying to make you sound important. Work with me here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you cover mostly, for those people who don't know, when you talk to me anyway, Common Core issues, school issues. One of the things that was shot my way by Maureen earlier this week, which I looked at and thought, really? Well, it doesn't surprise me. Institutionalizing, what, daycare? Something like that? What was that?
Yeah, that's a constant issue we continue to see. President Obama has made it one of his education initiatives, and here in Wyoming we've seen it before and we will see it again. It just continues to keep coming, but it is definitely an issue. It's an issue that parents were concerned about in the Republican primary, Superintendent of Public Instruction primary, and I think it's an issue they'll be concerned about in the general election as well, and ongoing.
Okay, well, what makes them think they should step into this as an issue? I mean, haven't parents been handling it by themselves just fine?
Well, it's, Glenn, apparently not, according to the folks on the left and, progressives who just put way too much hope in our public education system. And they can't answer the question of why the system is struggling to do all the things that it's promised to do, why scores are not going where they're going. And so now we focus on early childhood education. And somehow if we can just get to these kids sooner, we'll get test scores up. Let's test them some more. Let's get the scores up. So the focus is internally also on early education, and from 0 to 3. And I hope I did say that correct, 0 to 3, which I know is shocking. Somehow, if we get to them that early, we will have better test scores when they're in 3rd grade, and 8th grade, and 11th grade.
But don't studies show that that's not the case? That the earlier that you test these people or these kids, that after a summer off, those grades fall away and you have to start all over again because they're so young?
Yes, studies do show that, but I don't think that they're terribly concerned about studies. I mean, there's a larger agenda here about getting kids in these programs as early as possible. And it says a tremendous amount that states have actually now started enacting parents' rights bills that actually say things like the Oklahoma bill, that a parent has the right to direct the education of a minor child, has the right to direct the upbringing of a minor child, has the right to direct the moral or religious training of a minor child. It's a sad day when states actually have to pass legislation to say this, because all of this is ultimately continuing to push parents further and further into the corner and take away what should be an obvious right, which is to raise the children. Well,
I wonder about something, because one of the things I think the Founding Fathers got right, and they got so much right, was rather than saying, well, the parents have the right to do this and the parents have the right to do this, instead turn and say, well, the parents have the rights, the government's job is to protect that, and so the government shall not do the following.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that's a more cleverly and more effective type of legislation than just trying to give parents something that they should already have. Rather, we should tie the hand of government so that they don't overstep their bounds.
Okay. When I was told about this, what are their plans? I mean, anything in the state of Wyoming? Because we're talking about, what are we talking about, daycare here? What are we talking about?
Well, yeah, we've had, in the past there was a much more solid push several years ago to do universal preschool. And that has gone down in flames. So we haven't, as yet, we have not seen a direct piece of legislation that would bring about universal preschool. The Obama administration is, of course, pushing this and pushing federal dollars. So far, they have not made any of this, and states that have taken federal funds are not making this a mandatory program. It's just going into communities that already do some kind of early childhood and enhancing those programs, but not making the program what we would consider, and I think what Maureen, being from Canada, would consider universal child care, which is mandatory child care and preschool.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with mandatory this or mandatory that, because that brings us more and more into the socialist society that we never should have been in the first place. Mandatory, really, in this country?
Yeah, I think it would be very, very difficult. Certainly, yes, very difficult to get past. I mean, given that, as you said, we already have studies in countries, European countries, that have done this, that show that it has not made any significant improvement. Why in the world would we push for it here? And then it really strikes at the heart of something that's incredibly American, and that is, private parents' rights to raise children as they want to. Telling a parent they're required to do something with their child is going to be a pretty tough sell. But they're going to try. There's no doubt they'll continue to try.
Here I is, and Amy Edmonds is back on the phone with me from Wyoming Liberty Group as we're talking about your kids and your schools. So we have some pre-unofficial until the primary, but we all know what's going on, election results. Did I do that right, Amy?
I think you did.
Okay, in the state of Wyoming. So what do you think? Let's project a little bit. Does this do for the school systems in the state of Wyoming, and what should citizens, people like you and I, do from here to make sure that the schools are in the hands of the people?
Well, you need to continue, and parents and voters need to continue to educate themselves on who they're voting for and what those folks stand for, and also spend some time actually not just educating themselves, but making themselves an educator. So I think there's nothing more effective than a citizen who gets involved in either their local representative, their state house representative, and starts educating them. If you have good representation, if you have folks that are willing to sit down with you and listen to what you know to be true, and you can educate them, that's very powerful. And I've used the example of this most recent superintendent race, where you had 3 candidates on the Republican side who had varying degrees of knowledge. But by the last superintendent of public instruction debate, which was one on PBS, I think, a week or so ago, all of them were coming to the microphone eager to talk about the federalization of public education, and the fact that they didn't support the Common Core, and the fact that, they had concerns about all these other issues. I have to say, Glenn, I give a lot of parents around the state kudos for that, because some of those candidates were not as well educated when they began to run as when they headed into the primary election. And that's what is really powerful. It's not only should you educate yourself, but you should be able to educate others. And it can be hard to do. Some people are so passionate, and some people are a little too angry, and they struggle to be able to sit down with folks who are running for office or who are in office and explain to them. But I think it's really important. We've seen that in the superintendent race.
Well, one of the stories that I have on my reading assignment page today on my website shows that Common Core across the country has become very unpopular. Now, so that means we just have to fight or convince one or the other, the entrenched politicians and bureaucrats, to make sure we finally get rid of this thing. So we still have a long way to go, but at least with the general public, we seem to be winning that battle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most recent polls have shown that the Common Core is, very toxic. People don't like it. And yes, you're right. There's no doubt, Glenn, we still have work to do, and parents still need to get more involved and continue to work. But I take it as a good sign when you see a Republican primary where all 3 candidates are eager to let voters know that they're concerned about the Common Core. This is the kind of work that just has to continue to happen. And of course, that includes the governor and your local representatives. You really need to get out and educate yourself and then talk to them. Early childhood education is just another one of the issues that parents should be striking back and saying, we're not interested. The state is taking federal dollars. There should be real concern over taking those federal dollars. Even though right now the programs are not mandatory, Glenn, they still come with strings. When the state of Wyoming takes federal dollars, the current administration requires them to keep Common Core standards, to keep working on this data system. You don't really receive any federal education money right now through the Obama administration without those strings attached. That's just the reality. If you go to the U.S. Department of Education and you look at those grant dollars, if you go to the whitehouse.org website and look at the governor's early learning program, it says very clearly on there that if you're going to take federal funds, you're going to have to keep doing these things. So there are lots of reasons to oppose them.
During the course of this last, primary run that we had here and that we just voted for on Tuesday, did you see any change in our Governor Matt Mead on this issue at all?
I would say what I saw was a softening. I wouldn't say it's a change yet. And, it's one of those things where I don't know how, we'll have to wait and see how soft the softening truly is. But I definitely saw a change in the governor in that he used to sort of very defensively say, well, we have to have high standards. And, you know, the last statement I think I saw from his spokesperson, it wasn't directly from him, was that, listen, the governor's willing to look at other standards. They just need to be higher. So in my mind, that's a softening. Some people may very well want to argue with that, and that's fine, but it's definitely different from what began a very defensive, well, we have to have good standards.
Right. Well, and here's what I want to talk about with you next, because I've got the affiliate break coming up in just a moment from now. But the thing that gets me is we win this. You know, we keep Common Core out of our schools here in Wyoming. We still have many other issues that we have to fight. But you know, Amy, they never go away. These people who want this control just keep on coming back, don't they?
Well, they do. I mean, it's a responsibility as a citizen in this country that we just have to remain diligent.
Last 7 minutes of this hour of the program. My name is Glenn Woods. Bold Republic is on the radio with Amy Edmonds from Wyoming Liberty Group. Amy, yesterday I went into a long rant that took up most of the 3-hour show here, asking people where were they, why weren't they involved, not just at the polls, but I mentioned several times, you know, we have all of these school board meetings, we have all of these local meetings where people are supposed to show up and get involved with what their local school board is doing. There's not a whole lot of people at those meetings, Amy.
And that's true. That's exactly, yeah, that's true. And I can understand the rant. I think it's, you know, you really don't have a lot of excuse to spend time complaining if you're not showing up and getting involved. I think it's one of the things, the core of the Wyoming Liberty Group that we believe in so strongly is to help educate people, and not just educate them, but then send them out to be a force in their communities, to go and educate others and talk to others and attend to these meetings and have the facts at their fingertips. That is incredibly important, and we need to continue to do that, and people need to stay involved or get involved.
Well, and that's part of the reason I was talking with you last segment here, finished off the segment with, well, these people that we're fighting right now, they just never seem to give up. I don't know if they just have really good intentions, or they're just that evil, or I don't know, and I frankly don't care. I don't see what they're doing for our kids in our schools as good. I think that the problem that we have, the advantage they have, they never quit. We have people who just won't show up for even one meeting, and I'm not sure what really to do about that.
Well, you know, getting people involved, that's the only thing. And we have to stay, you know, diligent. We have to continue to be involved. And it can be exhausting. I get that. People get weary of it. But it's simply the responsibility of being a citizen in your community, in your state, in your country. And so you have to stay involved. And I agree, Glenn. I don't know what people's motives are. And I'm sort of like you. I tend to not really want to get too terribly involved in what motivates people. What I know is that what they are advocating for is simply wrong. Right. We have our ideas are correct, and so we can't stop. We have to continue to push for them.
All right, and on that note, you are a diligent warrior in this, so what are you working on lately?
You know, working on a small project for a package that we want to get out on standards, just showing people that there are really good alternatives. We're also having a big event, and Michelle Malkin will be coming into the state to Cheyenne. We're sorry it's down in Cheyenne, but please get your cars, vans, trucks together and get down to Cheyenne. We're going to have Michelle Malkin down there at the end of the month talking about the Common Core. You know, if you know Michelle, she's quite the firebrand. We're excited to have her in the state to really sort of kick off our education initiative going into the January budget session, or general session, which I know is kind of crazy to think it's going to happen, but it'll be here before we know it.
All right. Now, in the general session, does anything about Common Core and other education issues come up in this general session? Has something been introduced? Or for that matter, you used to be a legislator yourself. Are you introducing anything?
Well, I'm not interested in anything. I'm hoping that we will see some things. We certainly would like to see things from our other parents. From the last time, if you remember, Glenn, I think they'd like to take another bite at that apple and try again to try to get something through. So you can be pretty assured that you will see education bills in January, and we want to get out there and start educating folks as we see them and talk to them about it. It's so important that parents get active and push back. Their rights are just being eliminated. everywhere, and they need to get involved.
Well, now, on that note, here, let me pitch you an idea since you're down here. I really would love to see something introduced to the state that clearly says, okay, you legislators are not, when it comes to education, just like we talked about a moment ago, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. In other words, put restrictions on Wyoming's legislative body as to what they're not allowed to do. It ought to be a lot easier in the long run, including taking federal money for the following. I don't know who you would get to write that up, but I'm thinking that's probably a better approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's prohibiting or at least tying the hands of the legislature is not a bad thing. The problem is the legislature has to approve that.
Yeah, that's the hard
Therein
part.
lies the problem.
Yeah.
Right, you're asking them to make themselves less powerful.
Well, and they're always tempted by the money. That's what gets me is, it really has less to do with what the standards are or what's going on in our classrooms and what our kids are learning. You just dangle a few $100 million in front of a bunch of legislators. They start to salivate. They want that money.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly right. And it is troubling that, money seems to be the biggest influence. We hear a lot of talk about how we want to have excellence in education and we have a great educational system, but they don't follow the conclusion of what taking this money is going to mean to the education system. I mean, the education is so, the public education system is so bolted down. It barely has room to move. We talk about local control, but it essentially barely exists. I mean, it is a fish on the side of the bank flopping around. It's going to be dead in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. because of the federal ties and all this federal money. If we really mean we want an excellent education system, we need to get rid of those federal funds, and we need to get rid of state control. Quite frankly, I mean, to the level that we have, we need to look at the education system as a system that supports parents. It's about parents.
I just want to say for the record, as we wrap things up, Amy, that it's on the record. It's official. A woman just said that a man was right about something.
As soon as I said it, Glenn, I had a feeling you were going to bring that up.
I'm calling you out on that one. I'm marking it down on my calendar. Thanks for coming on, Amy.
Thanks, Glenn.